Okay, so here's something that happens more than you'd think. A business owner comes to me with like a blog full of posts. They are paying a blog service, or they're maybe writing them on their own, or have it using, especially nowadays, Claude or ChatGPT to help. And what they don't realize is that there is a measurement to help them see if there's results. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Not only how to write a blog to get results, but how to find that as well. Welcome to Coffee and Conversions, the podcast for millennial moms building something meaningful alongside real life. We're talking web design, SEO, Pinterest, and organic marketing, the behind the scenes systems to help your business get seen without taking over your life. I'm Julie, the founder of PNW Designs. I'm a Minnesota mom working full-time in corporate America, actually in finance, while growing my business on the side. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that growth doesn't come along from doing more. It comes from doing what actually works. Most of my business ideas start with coffee, and this podcast is all about strategies that actually convert, hence coffee and conversions. It's not about hustle for the sake of hustle, and it's not about pretty things that don't perform. So grab your coffee, pop in your headphones, and let's get into today's episode. So today I want to talk about what makes a good blog post in 2026 and why SEO blog writing looks different than it ever did even a year ago. We're going to go through the technical checklist I run on every post because it still matters. And then I'm also going to talk about what separates a blog that ranks from a blog that just sits there and doesn't get any traffic. Because what that actually is your story, and you can't shortcut that. I'm also going to walk you through how I actually work with my retainer clients, including a realistic example of why I do what I'm doing with blogging and what my process actually looks like. So, first things first is, like I said, I've had a couple of clients come to me that I've done SEO work, website work for that have blog services. And I don't want to say that like I'm going to poo-poo in all blog services. Absolutely not. There is wonderful blog services out there, especially people I know who are connected through my SEO community. What I have a problem with is somebody marketing themselves as non-AI written blogs or human-based blogs, and then I have a client show me the backend and it is clearly AI written. Now, I use AI. I use AI to help write blogs. There is a way to do that makes sense. But what is not going to work is if you go to a service where they say, pick a topic of these 10 topics, and they have every business picking from the same 10 topics, and then you give them 4 sentences about whatever you want to talk about within that topic, and it writes an entire blog in 30 seconds. That is not going to rank. What is also not going to rank is if a client voice memos into Claude or goes into ChatGPT with no keyword strategy and just says, I want to talk about this experience that I had a week ago. Here's my 5 sentences about it. Write my blog. It's not enough prompting. It's not enough structure. It's not enough strategy behind the AI tech. And AI has made blogging easy for everyone, but it's also created a ton of what we call slop. And I can pick it out immediately, and I'm sure everyone else can as well. Google has actually started to pivot and get smarter because of this. They are getting pickier, and they are de-indexing a lot of stuff. And what does indexing mean? Just as a pause, indexing means that if you create a piece of content or if you create a blog and it is not indexed, that means that it's not going to show up at search, period. They basically are ignoring it. So your goal is obviously, first and foremost, to get an index. Second, obviously, impressions. Then third, clicks, because duh. But if your post can be written by anyone at any time, and it's not about you and your unique story, then it's going to get treated that way, and it's probably not going to index. And that's what I was seeing. I have seen it many, many times over this last year, and that's why I wanted to talk about it and kind of talk through my process. And look, I'm not perfect. My clients' blogs aren't perfect, but I do feel like we have a system in place to give content a shot. The other thing I'll say is you have to remember that blogging is subject to an algorithm, and it's not instant. It takes a while. It takes momentum. It takes consistency, and it's not guaranteed. Not every blog is going to hit, even if it's good quality. But you got to put your best foot forward in order to do that, because, again, it's competitive, it's hard. And if you don't even put your best foot forward, what are you going to do about it? So Google recently made a update in May and June that continued to de-index content and prioritize quality. So what that actually means, and what is Google currently rewarding as we stand today in the third quarter of 2026. So first and foremost, Google is rewarding firsthand experience and not summarized research. That is the number one thing that I am seeing clients get wrong. So I will talk about my process later, but I have a strategy to solve for this, because if you are outsourcing your blog writing because you do not want to deal with it, you still have to be involved, period. That is my stance. I would love to say that you don't, but you do. And that is the only way that you have a chance of making sure that it's unique content to you and not just something regurgitated by AI. So that could mean a specific point of view. It could mean specific numbers. It could mean real client situations, actual outcomes. What I don't talk enough about, but it is kind of the fundamentals of SEO and the work that I do and copywriting, etc., is a term called EAT, E-E-A-T, which translates to experience, expertise, authority, and trust. Google is consistently making, and obviously, I'm again using Google synonymously with search, but they're consistently reprioritizing EAT authority. So you have to show your expertise, your authority, that you're trustworthy, that you have experience. I'm actually seeing clients get recommended more often on ChatGPT and Claude if they have good Google business profiles with reviews, because that's showing your EAT on top of your website, right? It's the combination. And the experience part is one of the ones that business owners skip a lot. They don't talk about it in their content. They don't talk about it in their copy. They want to sound like everyone else. And the more and more that I do this, the more and more that I have the experience of working on my own content and clients' contents, it's all about talking to your direct customer, talking one-on-one. I'm looking into the camera. I am talking to you as an individual, and then making sure your content speaks to that one individual and that it is authoritative and that you're talking about your unique experience and not just what everyone else is talking about. And unfortunately, Claude doesn't create things. It uses what's already existing. So yes, we can use Claude to generate and create a blog. And again, I'll talk about my process, but you need to have your own story within it. But I want to talk about Amy. Amy is a retainer client of mine that I've worked with for, I actually don't know, a good 6 months. And we have recently pivoted from doing Pinterest to me taking over as her blog writer. And part of that is accountability and consistency. She would write a blog every couple of months, she'd get one out, and it just wasn't enough content for Pinterest. And so I was like, well, why don't you let me just do your blogs? And what we ended up doing is, she has had a blog for over a year. She focuses on kind of from a thematic perspective, non-toxic wellness, parenting an autistic child or special needs child, having 3 kids under 5, and having a husband in Hollywood. So he's a Hollywood actor. He's gone all the time. And she has help now, but was solo parenting for a long time. And, just kind of her life experiences. She is also extremely strong in her faith and shares a lot of devotionals and things that help her from a faith perspective. So before I talk about her existing blogs, if you do want to check her out, her website is amybolandhauser.com, and I'll put it in the show notes. But Prior to working with me from a blogging perspective, she had another provider that was helping her with blogs and getting them scheduled, as well as they do like all of her design work. I mean, they were doing some work as far as like scheduling and putting in an SEO and title and meta description, but what they weren't doing is kind of guiding her strategy for the content that she wanted to write. So if she wanted to write about getting better sleep, which is a blog that she has, she would often use ChatGPT or Claude to help generate the copy based on, kind of the overall topic that she wanted to talk about. The keywords were not researched. It was not confirmed. And ultimately, when I look at her blogs prior, like I can tell they're AI written. Now, maybe not everyone can, but I can. And recently, when I was digging into the back end of her website and looking at Google Search Console and looking at indexing, almost all of her prior content is not indexed. So it was at one point, and Google has unindexed it, again, kind of downranking her because of that EEAT authority and that there wasn't enough personal story or personal Amy within the blogs. The ones that are still indexed are the ones that have her story in it, literally her personal story and or where we have integrated in that story. So what we've started to do is every single blog post that I do for her now, I'm actually interviewing her for whatever the topic is around. So recent blog post that we've talked about is her daughter's first birthday party, which is she's a sweet one. The concept and process of hiring an au pair and what that looks like. Parenting a special needs child at Disney World and the resources that Disney gives. Or she attended this She Speaks conference and talking about her experience there. Or I think it's Camp Hope, but I don't remember. But she went to a camp for special needs families. And all of these, I'm literally recording a conversation with her. We are talking back and forth through the topic. From there, I am taking that transcript, conducting SEO research for a targeted keyword on that, whatever the topic was, and then taking all of that information, transcript, SEO keyword research, and a brand voice guide. I have a custom project within Claude that has loaded everything we've worked on together. And then I'm using that as well as my blog skill, which has a bunch of rules in it. I'll talk about some of those in the podcast as well, to create her blog. So yes, I'm using AI to create her blog, but I'm using her actual words. Now, she is a special case where we have a regular touch base meeting at 7 a.m. every other Wednesday to do this. She does pay a premium for that service because it's what works for her. A lot of my clients, what I'm now asking them to do is voice memo me. And so with blog retainers going forward, I'm still continuing to build the AI system around this of like literally a client portal, which we'll get to in a different episode. But what I'm going to be asking every client who blogs with me to do is give actual story. So if you are not recording a podcast like I'm doing today, like this podcast will be turned into a blog, then I need voice memos from you. I am requiring that they give me a story with whatever we're talking about. Quick pause, because if you've been staring at your website and thinking something feels off, then this might help. I offer a free 30-minute consult after inquiry where we work and look at what's going on behind the scenes, what's working, what's getting in the way, and what would actually move the needle for your business. No pitching things you don't need, just an honest conversation about what I see and how we can grow together. If you want a second set of eyes and a real direction, you can book your free consult at bypwdesigns.com/contact, fill out the inquiry form, and we will get chatting. All right, back to the episode. So again, not every client gets a call. Some will get voice memos, or some will send voice memos. Some will be required, to do the calls if they can't make deadlines. But the reason the voice is important, and I found this in my web design process and SEO process as well, is what I'm finding is if I ask a question and I'm not requiring them to talk through it, then they are editing themselves. They are not typing as much as they would normally say, or they are using AI to answer the question. And that's not the point. The point is I want your actual thoughts. So I might want like a 5-minute voice memo answering, tell me about XYZ. This is the topic. What would you naturally say about this? And then I'm able to take that along with their project, because all of my clients get AI projects, brand voice document, skill document, copywriting documents or skills, and then craft a well quality blog with their story and the strategy behind it. So yes, story first, keywords second, and always unique. And so that's the layer that's getting that or gaining that EAT method. There is other things I always integrate in with blogs, and this is what I want you to think about when you are writing blogs. Again, you need to do your story. You need to talk, you need to voice memo, you need to do something in order to get your words out of your brain and not just use, hey, I want to talk about this topic, write it for me. So things that I look at when we are blogging and things that I want my clients to look at if they're doing it on their own is I want you to identify your core keyword. You do need to know how to do keyword research. There are prior podcast episodes about that, although I probably should update that. And then from there, once you confirm your primary keyword, you're going to plan out your H1 header and your subheadings around it. So again, your H1 header is always like your top header on the blog. Depending on your platform, it's pretty easy to tag. And you want to make sure that you are using that primary keyword in your H1 title as well as within the first paragraph of the blog. Then generally, one of the other things people get wrong is blogs are too short. You want them to be long enough. The average blog that ranks on the first page of Google is between 1,500 and 2,200 words. So not 5,000, but obviously not 500. And you want your slug, your URL slug, whatever the blog like slug is, to be under 75 characters. So you want to make sure that that doesn't get too long. And then you want to make sure you set a unique SEO title and meta description. That is something that I really should just, again, do a whole podcast episode on SEO titles and meta descriptions. But SEO title is going to be the title that shows up when you search on Google. It's the blue like title. Depending on your platform, it's going to be in a different place on where you set it. Just Google or ask Claude, right, where to set your SEO title for your blog. But however, it's extremely important and something I see often missed. You want it to have your primary keyword in it, but you also want it to be something that people would want to click on. And then with your meta description, the things that I would say is like, don't start your meta description with learn or discover, because those are like clear AI tells. You want your meta description to be like, why should somebody click on this blog? Why should somebody listen to you? If you add images to your blog, you need them to be under 1 megabyte, and make sure that you're adding alt text. So make sure you have properly labeled images, that it creates some value to the blog, but also creates some like visual interest, and that they aren't like too big from a photo size perspective. On top of that, one of the other things is making sure that blogs are creating a spider web. So what I mean by that is you shouldn't have a blog with no links in it, not linking to anything else on your website. You really want your website to be like one big spider web, interconnecting everything where it makes sense. And so it's an authority measure of like, okay, I find this topic valuable because I'm continuing to relink back to it. And then if you have external reputable links that you can use, that's another way to add that authority, especially if you're like sourcing information. Now, don't forget to check for mobile friendliness, meaning i.e. check your mobile layout, make sure that you can actually read the blog on your mobile layout. And then after you post it, make sure you're submitting your blog to your Google Search Console to crawl it. So again, what you do is you take your posted URL, go to your Google Search Console, and then on the top search bar, put in your URL, hit enter, and then it'll crawl you can ask it to request for indexing. And obviously, like, this checklist is the floor. It's not the strategy. It gives you something to start with. And the biggest thing is that keyword research, which is going to be the hardest for people who don't do it on a regular basis. But it is really important because keywords matter, nuances in keywords matter. And oftentimes with blogging, like, that's the number one missing thing is people will want to talk about a topic but not realize that they don't have an SEO keyword to go with it. And then therefore it's not searchable. So again, going back to what I think is winning in 2026 from a blogging perspective, it's quality. It's that EAT, experience, expertise, authority, and trust. If you are going to blog, do not keep it generic. Make sure you are using your unique perspective. You are writing in the first person. You are saying something somehow that not everyone can say. And even for me, for this example, it's Amy's story. I'm giving you that example of the fact that I have a case study where I have taken somebody who has had all of their blogs de-indexed for lack of quality, and now we're creating new quality-based content that is getting indexed right away from a Google perspective. Now, again, not guaranteeing results, not guaranteeing clicks, but we are getting the direction that we need from a blogging perspective. And then finally, I know this can be overwhelming. I know that not everyone wants to blog, but the example I use with everyone is if you have a website and you are not regularly updating it, it's going to reduce your EAT. It's going to reduce your trustworthiness around your authority because Google has no other way of measuring that you are successful within whatever niche topic you are talking about. So long form content is one way to continuously update your website and build your authority on search. It's not the only way, but it is definitely one way you can do that. So for my clients, for retainer clients, what it actually looks like working with me is we do the questionnaire, we do the interview, I give them the topic, and then we research the SEO keyword research. We write based on their voice memos they give back to us, and then we schedule. And that is with my team. I am pretty transparent now. I do have a team, but I am the one peer reviewing all the SEO research and making sure that it makes sense since English is my first language and it's not necessarily the first language of my VAs. So know that if you do work with me ever, yes, I have contractors that help, but I am always peer reviewing. I am always verifying the information. It is important to me from a quality perspective, back to our conversation from earlier in this podcast. So 3 things I want you to take away. 1, the technical checklist of like your actual blog structure still matters. Keywords, headers, meta descriptions, internal links, all of it. You do need to do it. Number 2, I didn't mention this, but frequently asked questions. People are more and more increasingly searching for answers or searching based on questions. So make sure you have a section in your blog where you are answering those questions, but you need to answer them from a quality perspective, because if somebody else has already answered that question themselves in a different way that's better, then Google's going to use that answer. So frequently asked questions are very important, but they also need to be quality. Number 3, the thing that makes a blog rank in 2026 is only something you can add. Your story, your opinions, the stuff you learned the hard way. If your post reads like it could have come from anyone, then Google's going to treat it like it came from no one. And 4, get it out of your head and onto the page, however works for you. Talk into a voice memo. Have a friend interview you. Whatever gets you sounding like the person instead of a press release. And if you want to see the checklist I walked you through, we will link it. And it's in the blog post for the episode over at bypwdesigns.com. And again, I'll link it in the show notes. And if you're sitting on a blog that isn't doing anything for you, or you know your story should be in there and you just don't have the time to write it, that's where retainer services come in. So slide into my DMs, we can chat about it. I will be adding additional retainer clients into Q1 of 2027. So thanks again for hanging out with me today. And if this one was useful, send it to a business owner who's been blogging and may just be blogging into a void, and we don't want that. See you next time. And that's a wrap on today's episode of Coffee and Conversions. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate every single person who listens. If this episode helped you think differently about your business, I'd love if you left a rating and review or shared it with a friend who is running a business alongside you, because community is everything. It's the easiest way to help this podcast reach more women who want a strategy that actually works. You can find links, resources, and anything mentioned in today's episode in the show notes. For more tools, services, and behind-the-scenes strategy, head over to bypwdesigns.com. And if you want to peek into my real life, corporate job, mom life, running a business, and really just like the true me, you can find me at Instagram over at julie.pwdesigns, and I hang out there most days. Until next time, keep on building intentionally, and I will see you back here at Coffee and Conversions.